I made a video recently in which I told you of the story of a Soviet-Russian transmitter that was dug up on a farm in North Wales during ploughing. The evidence pointed towards a Russian spy ring targeting Liverpool, who visited a nearby hotel, snuck out in the middle of the night to bury the transmitter in a watertight box, and then fled the country. The idea being that the transmitter was available for somebody to find and then use as part of their subversive activities. I posed a couple of questions in that video. How many more transmitters were buried across the UK, lying dormant, ready for a Soviet agent to dig up and use when the time was right? How many others were found? How many are still out there to this day? This all got me thinking of the people who were caught engaged in spying activities involving the reception or transmission of shortwave signals, coded messages if you like, number stations. I've covered this at length. During the height of the Cold War, number stations were widely used, and still are to this day, for sending coded messages that couldn't be decoded. Encrypted or enciphered are probably more accurate terms. A one-time pad, concealed in soap, a walnut shell, chewing gum, microdot film, or a simple paper pad was used at both ends to send and receive messages concealed within an unbreakable cipher. These messages could detail dead letter drops, locations where documents, photographs or anything else could be left by a handler for an agent to pick up and vice versa. They could include hotel details or instructions relating to far more sinister and deadly actions. With everything I've just described, it's hard not to let the mind wander to a London of days gone by, infiltrated by Soviet spies, absolutely brimming with them, weaving their intelligence-gathering webs throughout the city. I don't doubt that London is very much the same today. Envision that web, however, overhead, albeit invisible, a web of shortwave communications penetrating every square inch of the city, a web of secrecy being passed from London to others lurking in the shadows in far-flung lands, which brings me to the case of Erwin van Haarlem. The story starts on a cold Saturday morning in April 1988, when detectives arrived outside the North London home of Václav Jelinek. Using the name Erwin van Haarlem, Jelinek was a Cold War-era spy for communist Czechoslovakia who worked in London. He lived here, at 35 Silver Birch Close in Friern Barnet, and became the centre of an investigation led by the British intelligence agency MI5, who suspected he was a spy. At 9:15 am, detectives from Special Branch, the anti-terror unit of London's Metropolitan Police, stormed his house and found Van Haarlem hunched over a radio in his kitchen in his pyjamas. He was tuned into a number station, while a female voice recited numbers in Czech. It's believed Václav's call sign was 646, and the station he used to receive numbers from was S05, nicknamed the Czech Lady and operated by the Czech intelligence services. Václav or Van Haarlem tried to lower his radio's antenna. It jammed. When he pulled open a drawer and grabbed a kitchen knife, an officer tackled him and yelled, "Enough, it's over, it's over." When they searched his home, they found a one-time pad, a tool used to decrypt number stations, which, if used correctly, renders them uncrackable to anyone else, concealed in a bar of soap. They found car magazines, later found to contain messages written in invisible ink, and the chemicals to reveal them. On the 4th of March 1989, at 11:45 am, a judge sentenced Erwin van Haarlem to 10 years in prison for espionage. After his trial, he was sent to Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight. After 5 years, the end of the Cold War, and a hunger strike, he was released and deported to what had by then become the Czech Republic. He died in Prague on the 8th of February 2022 at the age of 77. This was a very public case which clearly exposed the use of shortwave and number stations in espionage. Another high-profile case was that of the vile creature that is Jeffrey Prime. He's almost 88 today, and is a former British spy who worked for the Royal Air Force as well as the Government Communications Headquarters, or GCHQ. While working for these organisations, Prime disclosed information to the Soviet Union. As he began his employment with GCHQ, he received Soviet radio messages at night and was informed of a dead letter drop in Esher, Surrey. He was initially arrested for sexual crimes against young girls on June 28, 1982. His second wife, Rona, found his espionage equipment, including a briefcase with a false bottom and one-time code pads, under their bed about 3 weeks after his initial arrest for the sex offences. She then contacted the police. At Prime's home, Laburnum Cottage in Pittville Crescent Lane, a 10-minute walk from GCHQ Cheltenham, police found a powerful transistor radio, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and a mini Kremlin library. The stacked shelves of Russian reference books, literature, and posters may have been typical of a Soviet affairs specialist, as Prime was. He confessed to the spying charges and was subsequently charged under the Official Secrets Act on July 15, 1982. He was sentenced to a total of 38 years imprisonment, but was released in 2001. Enough said about him, but another classic case of shortwave being used in espionage. The Portland Spy Ring was an espionage group active in the UK between 1953 and 1961. It comprised of 5 people who obtained classified research documents from the Admiralty Underwater Weapons Establishment, or AUWE, on the Isle of Portland in Dorset, and passed them to the Soviet Union. One of their methods of communication was shortwave radio. Harry Horton and Ethel G. were British. They worked at the AUWE and had access to the areas where research was stored. After they obtained information, it was passed to their handler, Conan Molody, who was acting under the name Gordon Lonsdale. He was a KGB agent acting in the UK under a Canadian passport. Lonsdale would pass the documents in microdot format to Lohner and Morris Cohen. Lohner and Morris Cohen were American communists. In 1954 they moved here, to 45 Cranley Drive, Ruislip, just outside London, under the cover of 2 New Zealanders, Helen and Peter Kroger. Peter opened up an antiquarian book business in the Strand in London. After settling into their new life, the Krogers made contact with Lonsdale. He assisted the couple when they dug out the rubble in their cellar under the kitchen to hide a radio transmitter to contact Moscow. In the attic was a 75-foot long, 23-metre concealed antenna. Also found in the house were one-time pads concealed in everyday items, along with microdot film containing secret documents. The ring was exposed in 1960 following a tip-off from the Polish spy Michael Goliniewski about a mole in the Admiralty. Lonsdale was sentenced to 25 years in prison, the Krogers received 20 years, and Horton and G were both sentenced to 15 years. Something that was never really widely reported was the fact that a second transmitter was found buried in the garden of the Krogers' home. A spade thudding against metal in the suburban garden in April 1977 opened up the pages of what went down as one of the most sensational spy files in British history. The metal was a Russian-made radio transmitter. The transmitter was discovered by the present occupiers. Now the question is, how did MI5 and Scotland Yard, who spent days searching the bungalow and garden, miss the buried radio? G died in 1984, Horton in 1985. Lonsdale died in October 1970. While on a picnic with his family, after his second glass of vodka, he had a stroke and died within a few days. Helen Kroger died in December 1992, and Peter in June 1995. They were both buried in the KGB's Novokuntsevo cemetery. Another little-known story involves Miranda, a suspected female spy that operated from a block of flats in London. Scotland Yard's Special Branch set up a 24-hour watch on a block of flats in Highgate on February 25, 1961, after reports that coded shortwave radio messages were being exchanged with Moscow and Accra, the capital of Ghana. Officers were ordered by Commander Evan Jones, head of the Special Branch, to trace an African girl student using the codename Miranda. Her name was mentioned in the broadcasts, and she was believed to be living in the Bloomsbury area of West Central London. One of the flats under surveillance was leased recently to a foreign student. It was not fully occupied on the night of the surveillance operation. A witness claimed that a man started to move in sometime prior but had not properly started to live there. The witness alleged that workmen had been going there most evenings. They often worked from 7 p.m. until midnight and had lifted the floorboards in the flat. Peering in the window, a line of Christmas cards could still be seen on the mantelpiece. The room was sparsely furnished, and normally the windows were heavily curtained. Line curtains blotted out the front room of the flat, and multicoloured Venetian blinds shielded the other windows. While transmissions were monitored from Highgate, it was also believed that further broadcasts were emanating from Bloomsbury. The surveillance came after evidence of communist plans to foment riots among 15,000 African students in Britain was presented to the Home Secretary. It's perhaps no coincidence that the trade delegation of the Russian Federation in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is nearby in Highgate. You can see it in the trees from Parliament Hill. The UK government has described this place as a den of spies. Daily flights of Apache helicopters over the area back in 2018 were apparently the government's way of loudly letting the Russians know they've got their eyes on them. Video link in the description. What became of this story isn't clear. I don't know that Miranda was ever caught. Police raided a house in November 1971 as a man accused of conspiring with Soviet defector Oleg Lyalin was recording a coded message from Moscow. The man, Kyriakos Kosti, 29 of Finsbury Park, London, admitted 5 charges under the Official Secrets Act. His brother-in-law, Konstantinos Martiniu, 26, also of Finsbury Park, admitted 2 charges. In Kosti's room, police found hollowed-out torch batteries containing film or negative, a pencil that could be unscrewed to reveal a hiding place for pieces of film, a shortwave radio and a tape recorder, a coded sheet, and a radio signalling plan. Police forced open the door of the first bedroom at 44 Upper Tollington Park. Kosti was inside, and on a sideboard was a portable radio tuned to a shortwave frequency connected to a cassette tape recorder. In front of it lay 9 sheets of squared paper, and on the top sheet 39 groups of figures, obviously a one-time pad. Leaning against the radio was a scrap of paper bearing in red ink a radio signalling plan giving instructions on day, month, time, transmission frequencies and call signs. A few minutes earlier, a government radio operator began monitoring the transmission call sign, and the operator subsequently recorded the coded message which had been transmitted following the call sign. When the police officers subsequently played over the tape they'd found on the recorder in the room, there had been recorded the identical call sign and part of the coded message which the government operator had elsewhere heard and also begun to record. The transmission and the call sign and coded message, which was in the process of being recorded by Kosti, came from Moscow. After pleading guilty at their trial, Kosti was sentenced to 6 years and Martiniu received 4 years. Kosti would be 83 today and Martiniu would be 80. I hope you enjoyed this instalment. Erwin van Harlem, Jeffrey Prime and the Krogers are sort of old news now, but I hope Miranda and the story of Kyriakos Kosti and Konstantinos Martiniu was something new to you.